met me, I'm Ruth Clayton. I'm currently a director at Grated, which is a small practice that I set up with an ex-colleague of mine from Ellis Williams Architects. Just a bit of history of why I feel qualified to stand in front of you today is started back in '96 doing sitting girls in AutoCAD, and then moved into architectural desktop around 2004-2005. Came into Revit in 2009, took over the BIM manager role 2013, and then found myself here where I am today, running a small practice with nobody to tell what to do. So I've come in today to hopefully help you all and tell you what to do. So when deciding what to do a talk on, I was kind of thinking, well, what do people always ask me about? And while I was BIM manager, probably the most common query was always, how do you set up the site location and the topography? As with everything in Revit, there's a million and one ways to do most things, so this isn't necessarily the most flashy way, but I've found it tends to work most of the time. And I don't know how many of you use Revit LT, but this is the main way I'm showing you is the only way that does work in LT. One of the things I wanted to cover first off is just some of the kind of tips and pointers that you need to consider before you start working. So my preference, assuming you're working with a new building, is to have one file that's your site file and one file that's your building file. This is generally because your site is where it is, it's not going to move, and it's fixed. Whereas your building might be around the site, it might be up and down. So having the two separate makes it a lot easier for you to position your building on the site. But if you're working with an existing building and you're adding on to it, well, the existing building is where the existing building is, so it's not going to move. But just one of those things to think about. The other thing that you have to consider with Revit is Revit doesn't like things being a long way from the origin. So when you're dealing with sites, they're large items, so you want to try and get it close to the origin, because that will make Revit happy, and you don't like to upset Revit. The other issue is you don't really want to upset your structural engineers either, and structural engineers, most of their software works in positive space, so you want to try and draw a model in positive space, so above and to the right of the origin point. And also, once you've started modelling, you don't want to move your model. You just want to leave it where it is. So thinking about where you're modelling in the space of Revit is important. So that's why it's important to understand what the Revit space is. It's not immediately obvious, but there's three origins in Revit. One is invisible, and you can't find it, and you can't change it, and you don't really know it's there. The only way to find out where it is to bring in a CAD file, origin to origin, with the crosshairs, and that will show you where your origin is. And when you link things by origin, that is the origin that Revit is using. The second point is the one that you can see. It's the project base point, which hopefully, if you've used Revit, you're aware of this. Depending on what files you're using, if you're using the out-of-the-box Revit file, the project base point is coincident with the origin point. So that is where the origin point is. And they probably are the same, and I wouldn't recommend moving them. But it is possible that you're working with a template file where the project base point has been moved off the origin. Yeah, in which case speak to your person in charge of your template files. This also sets your project north point, because there's two north points in Revit as well. The third origin point is the survey point. So this is what actually sets out where your building site, or wherever it is in real world coordinates. And it also sets up where the kind of true north, or what we understand to be north, is. It looks like this. It's easily rendered, it's easily changed, and you can move it as often as you like within a project, certainly within your building. If you're setting up your site file, it should be fixed and stay where it is. So having the two systems means you can easily swap your views between your building, where your building file wants to sit and where your site files might want to sit, orientated to true north. So they're the pointers for Revit. The other things you'll need if you're setting up a site file is some DWG files or other CAD software files. So a 2D DWG, it might just be an OS map with a benchmark level. Ideally you want a topo survey. ideally with 3D contour lines in it. If there aren't 3D contour lines, you can create your own just using 3D polylines and moving them to the correct elevation. And more importantly, you need to know that there are moldings and eastings in that site file. And the other point to check is that the units are what you think they are. There's not a right or wrong answer. If you're drawing in meters, just check it's in meters. If you're drawing in millimeters, check it's in millimeters. Or even in inches, there are people working that. Again, if you've got these files, I would always recommend park them somewhere safe, take a copy, and then you can do what you like with the copy, and you know you can always go back to the original just to double check if things have inadvertently moved around. So ideally, I would recommend that you draw a horizontal and vertical line and with a bit of text, put your northings and eastings on there so you know you've got your point of your known point. Typically, I would expect an OS map or a topo survey that you bring in will have the correct XY coordinates to northings and eastings. But as I said, Revit doesn't like things being miles away, so put your crosshairs on and move it so that it's over the origin point. So you can see there you've got your origin coincident with your known northings and eastings. As long as you've got that, Revit doesn't really care where anything is. You know, it doesn't even need to be orientated to north point. As long as you've got some fixed northings and eastings, Revit's happy. So then you've got your 3D contour lines if you've got a file with those in. If you haven't, it's not too critical, but if you've got that, again, you want to save this file, and you'll see there you've got, you can't quite make out, but there is northings and eastings crosshairs, and that's coincident with your XY coordinate and positioned with a Z elevation of 0, and you've got your your 3D contour lines in there. So you're kind of ready to go. You've got your site plan in CAD, you've got your 3D contour lines, your building, or your site Revit file, and your building Revit file. So then you go starting with your site Revit file. So you want to go to an elevation view, and by default, again, the out-of-the-box template, your level 0 is coincident with your origin elevation of 0. The level 0 in Revit is quite a critical level. It's a special level that Revit understands to be the origin point, so you want to keep that at your level 0. So that's why if you change that to your sea level and rename it sea level or whatever you want to call it, and then create another new level that's your level 0 for your building, just so that you can tell the difference there. And then you can set the elevation in your building level. Again, you might not know what it is yet, but if you've got the level there, you can easily adapt and change it as you go. So you've set up your site plan. The key things you want to look for here is that it's got the associated level, is that it's associated to the sea level, and not that it's associated to a level 0, a building level or a different level within the model. You need to check that it's on an existing phase, assuming that you are building an existing phase of the model and you're going to change it moving forwards, and that it's orientated to true north. So you've got the two options of project north or true north, but your site files you'd set up as your true north. So then you can link in your CAD files. So we're in the existing site file and we've gone to link CAD. So I've got my two files set up there. I'm going to bring in my 2D existing site plan. Then want to check this little tick box down here of current view only. I would recommend bringing it in as current view only. You're going to be bringing this in as a drawing file. You don't want it to appear everywhere. The difference of ticking that box on off is whether it's a detail item or a model item. So a detail item is 2D, only appears in the view that you're in. If you bring it in with the box not ticked, it comes in as a model item, it's 3D, it appears everywhere, which isn't necessarily what you want, but if you want to do it that way, it's perfectly acceptable. Again, you can pick your colours there. If I'm bringing stuff in as a detail item, I'll bring it in as black and white, so it fits on the sheets in black and white. Next one, correct lines that are slightly off axis. This is a topo survey. Lines are going to be slightly off axis, and you don't want to straighten up, so deselect that one. And then just pick origin to origin, open your file, and you've got your site plan water. So we've got our origin point at the bottom here. This video will play. So now you need to set up your coordinates at point. So I found this is the easiest way to do it, is you just go in and type in your site coordinates on there. You can link files, or you can't in LT, but you can in full Revit. But it does have its own issues. So setting up this way, I think, is fairly foolproof. That you just type in what you want, and that's it in. And once you've got your site set up, you can check your project base point, that's telling you that those numbers match your northings and eastings that you've got written in there. And you'll also notice then when you zoom out, your survey point has gone miles away. You can leave it there if you want to, or you can move it closer by just remembering to one-click the paperclip, and then you can just drag it over to your project base point. Apologies here that the zooming took a little while, but once you've snapped it into place on the origin point, you've got everything quite close together. And again, that makes Revit happy that everything's kind of snapped in nicely together there. And again, you can check that the survey point now is matching there, and then don't forget to just click the paperclip back on again when it's done. So we've got everything there as we need it to be. So is that just running the same video again now, I think. So next you want to bring in your contour files into this file. So same again, you've got your existing site file, you're linking your CAD file, but this time we're bringing in the contours. So this is a 3D file, so we want it to be 3D, we don't want it to be flat, so we're making sure that we're not bringing it in. Because it's a 3D item, I tend to leave the colours as they are, so you can easily spot the difference between what's 2D and 3D. Again, don't select correct lines that are off axis. And you can select the origin to origin, open the file, and you're good to go with your site file. So you're checking, you're in the existing phase, and you can create your topo surface. So you're doing it from an imported in item. So you've selected your file, you've got all the layers that are in the CAD file, so you just want to keep the layers that you've got named as your contours, and then it automatically creates your topo surface, and you can easily change the material to whatever you want it to be. And if you go back into the plan view, you can see that actually that's hidden. You can't see the CAD file behind it. You need to bring that into the foreground, which again you can do because it's a detail item. If you brought it as a 3D item, it's going to be stacked underneath the topo surface, and you're not going to be able to see it. So if you want to be able to see it, you need to bring it in as the 2D item, and then you can zoom in, and if you need to, you can add individual points as you go if you've not got a particularly detailed set of 3D coordinates. But again, it's quite tedious to add all those points, so you'd be better off getting some kind of 3D, a bit more 3D information for you to drape your topo surface over. But if you're fine-tuning your levels, that's the principle of adding in some of your levels in there. I think that's finished on there. And then, yeah, just to show you then that you've got your 3D surface in there, and then just to check again that the phasing of the topo surface is correct. And then also the final bit is just to turn off your 3D contour lines, which you don't necessarily see those in the file, so you can turn those off, and you've got checking in your new view that it's set to existing. So you're happy now that you've built your existing site topography. So you can move on then to your building file. This is not high architecture, this is just a very simple basic building that I drew for this purposes. So hopefully there's no critics in the audience. So you've got your building file there, good to go, and you want to bring in your site plan into there. So again, as we've just gone through, you're linking your site plan, you're bringing it in current view only, setting it to black and white, and checking its origin to origin, bring that in, and it should appear in there. Excuse the, I had better video editing skill, I would cut that bit out. So again, what happens now is you don't want to move your building to suit your site file. If you bring your CAD file into the foreground, you want to move your CAD file so it suits your building. So again, I mean, I'm using an existing site file here just to show you. If you'd obviously you'd have a proposed site file and you'd know exactly where you want your building to go. But you pick your point and you move and reorientate the CAD file so that it suits your building. If your building stays where it is, you don't move your building. So just using the rotate tools to put that in the right place. And again, this is something within your building file. If you were moving your building around, you'd move your site file and you'd update your coordinates as you go. But you're leaving your project base point in your building in exactly the same place. And you're moving the site relative to the building. So once you've got that positioned where you're happy with it, you can then set up. So the first thing you need to do is set up your north point once you've got your site plan in there. So if we go up to where we've got our crosshairs and we go to the Manage tab and then select the Rotate to True North. So we've got the error message there because I'm set up to Project North in this view rather than True North. So picking that up, and you can change it then to Rotate to True North. So you pick your north point, so your rotation point, pick where the north is and then rotate it round, and Revit will automatically snap to the north point. So you've got it orientated correctly. You can see your project base point is still as it was, but your survey point has now shifted. So you need to get your survey point in the right place. So it's the same as we did before, specifying the coordinates at a point, which is not selected correctly. And you're typing in your coordinates again and setting the building east of the northings and the eastings. And that gets locked in place. And then you again can update then your survey point to check that that's in the right place. So that's gone to 0, 0, unpinning, or clipping, I suppose is the correct term, and moving it up to your building so you've got those in the right place. And as long as you remember to pin that back, you really shouldn't have any issues with things moving around with the building file. So the next thing then for your building, you've set your north point, you've set your coordinates, you need to tell it what level it's at. And again, this is something that might change as you develop the building site, but the principle is if you go into your building file, go into any elevation, I've added 2 levels to the level point there, so you're just going to tell it, put in what the building elevation is, and you can see there that those 2 level markers have changed. So our project level, that's a project level, so that's reading off the project base point. We've got a survey point, so that's reading the survey level information. And again, we've got a project elevation point, which is reading the project height, so you can check, that you've got your building in the right place. So that's set the building with the levels. At this point, again, this is something you don't have to do. It's just something that I find useful to do, is then I add a couple of reference planes that are picked over the top of our markers in the CAD files, and just give them the name of the northings and eastings. And again, you've got that fixed point, so you can quite easily see if something has shifted, these crosshairs aren't going to be lining up. It's very easy in Revit to accidentally drag something, move something and not realise that you've dragged and moved it. But if you've got the crosshairs in the CAD files and you've got the crosshairs in the Revit files and you've got them named and you know where they're supposed to be, it's a lot easier to double check, and it's quite an easy visual check as well to just see that things are in the right place. So then the next bit then is that you might want to bring these files together and link the files. This is something where often people do have issues with linking files together and things seemingly moving around. A lot of the issues is, I think, if you've started and you've got your building in positive space and you send that to somebody and they bring it in origin to origin and they draw over the top of it, then you've already got everybody's just stacking up. If you've drawn it off somewhere odd and it doesn't suit somebody else's system, they'll move it and their building will be somewhere else, and it all can get very messy. But I think if you follow some of the tips at the start there, you should find that all the project base points should be consistent across everybody's models, and you've got your shared coordinates set up so your survey points are set up correctly. So I'm going to, my preference, which is a bit more foolproof, is to bring the files together using origin to origin. The first one I'm going to show you is actually to start linking it using the shared coordinates. But that actually ties the two files together. So if you go into that, because your site is the fixed element, and that's where it is, link your files into your site, don't do it the other way around, because that will, as you move your building around the site, it will update to the site coordinates, whereas if you bring your site to your building and you move your site around, it will update your site rather than vice versa. But, so I think the first option here is linking using the shared coordinates. So I think that's actually slipped off the side slightly there on that side. But you brought it in and it should come, they should come together then. First time you can just see it's come up there in the middle, that it's, oops, sorry, let me go, can we start going back a slide? Sorry, can I just come out of this site and I'll just shift that back, and then that's slipped off the page and then be able to see all of that then. So you want to link your Revit file, so bring in the building file, again, and bring it in by shared coordinates. Because we've set up the coordinates in the site file and we've set up the coordinates and the levels in the building file, it's quite quick and easy. It brings them together straight away, it's in the right place, and the two files are linked together. If you move one, it will ask you, do you want to save the positions back relative to each other, which, you know, can be good, but if someone does it without realising, you're going to have issues. So my preference generally is to use the origin to origin. Exactly back to shared coordinates. So if you bring them in origin to origin, you're not setting up that link, and the two will stay where you put them without somebody. Because if somebody accidentally updated the coordinates of the site file, that will update the coordinates of the building file, and you might not necessarily realise that because everything else is going to seemingly be in the right place. So when you put in origin to origin, you go with your project base point origins. So it's easy enough, you can move your file up to your building height. So we can see that's up there, and then you just, again, you're moving your site file, but we've got our crosshairs there so we can use those to line the building up, which makes it a lot easier to make sure that you've got bits in the right place. So you can move the origin points together, and then you're just rotating, and you'll find them in the same place, and they should stay where you've put them. Again, you know, you can set up your coordinates with your CAD files, but again, that means your CAD files are a long way from the origin, and if somebody accidentally moves your CAD file, it messes up your Revit files. So use the shared coordinates with care, but we've got our building in there in the right option. And again, then you can link your site file back into your building file. And just for speed, the option I chose on this one was to bring it in by shared coordinates, just because because it's quicker and it just shows you that the sites, the building sat on the site correctly. And again, whichever way you're going to, you know, don't, if you are linking your building into your site file by origin, don't then link your site file into your building by shared coordinates. Stick with one system or the other to make sure that you've got it in the right place. So you can see there the building sat quite nicely on the existing ground level. So we've set up the coordinates, everything's in the right place, so now you want to start progressing and moving on to the next bit. So I've just said there about checking that if you're using the shared drawings file to keep an eye on where you are with it. Also check, it might not be an issue if you're using just your own files and they've all come from the same template and they're probably using the same phasing, but if you get a file from another consultant, they might have different phasing names and they won't necessarily map to the same phase, so you might just want to check that the phasing is correct in there. The other thing to note is that if you're not working with central files, you can't open both files at the same time. It will unload it from the other file and that loses all your undo, redo settings as well. So just think about either closing the files down or you have to unload and reload your linked files. The next thing I'm going to go on and show a little bit about modelling topography in Revit. Revit's not great for doing this, and it works by triangulating points. It's not very good at just having like a step and a curve, or it's quite clunky to model smooth falls. So if you want something really swish, I wouldn't use Revit, but if you just want something that's kind of okay, and you don't want to put in too much effort, then you can have a go and you can get some reasonable stuff. I wouldn't bother going to too much effort with it because you probably won't find the results are that much better, and you could find yourself doing quite a lot of abortive work. One of the main things, it's not just about modelling topography, it's modelling anything in Revit, is think about what you want to achieve, think about where you want to end up before you start modelling. Because once you've modelled it all, if you haven't modelled it in the right way, it won't do what you want it to do. This is especially if you're looking at maybe doing like cut and fill and you want to show the existing versus the proposed. You need to make sure that you're modelling that in the right way. Again, if you're wanting to track changes, model as much as you can in the existing topography before you start making any changes or doing any proposed topography. Once you've split the sites out into existing and proposed, if you realise you've got some levels along the existing, it can be very difficult to get the exact levels to come through and to get them to be exactly the same without a lot of abortive work. So don't be too quick to start with a very rough existing site and then splitting it up and making changes and then thinking you'll go back and update the existing before, because you're not going to quite get them to match up, especially if you've got multiple phases as well. So the key tools for modelling your topography, not in any particular order. One of the first ones you probably will come to use is the split surface tool. So that it does what it says on the tin. It splits the topographies up so they behave completely independently. They'll have different materials, the levels work independently. So you may decide we've got this large piece of topography, we've got our site in the middle, and we decide that we'll just split off our site area so that we can highlight and model, this is the site. You can use the pick line tool if you know you've got a decent boundary line drawn in the CAD file. You can probably use the pick line and the tab tool to select it all in one go. I haven't in this case, so I'm just quickly kind of tracing around it just in a very rough and ready part of the site. You either need to have a closed loop within the boundary of the site, or you slice off and cut through the boundary to slice a piece of the site off. So again, you could decide then you'll just make the bit that you're not going to be doing anything with because it's well beyond the boundaries of the site, change the material so it doesn't stand out, so that visually you can see that you've got your site in there. And then again, just check you split the site up, they're both still in the same phase, in the existing phase. And you've got those two work there. So the next tool then is the Birch Services tool. Now this can just be to correct the fact that you didn't mean to split your site up, or you might want to use it to try and introduce some kind of steps within the model. So it basically just brings the edges back together. So just to demonstrate how this kind of works, as I said, there's not a lot of detailed information in terms of levels on this site plan. The more spot levels you have, the more detailed the levels are, the more finessed the results are that you'll get. But if we just split this bit of topography in half, and we can raise one half up just to show you what Revit does when it merges the surfaces back. So, there, while that opens up. This way. So we've selected the one bit of side there, we can easily just move that up, just so we move it about 10 metres. So you can see there that we've got a step between the two. And you might think, oh, well, that's good. If we merge them back, Revit will just put a vertical line between the two. But what it actually does is it takes away the point levels across the edges and kind of moves back and merges them between whatever the next levels are. So you can see you've got this kind of quite wide embankment. If you've got some levels a bit closer to the edge, you would get a more vertical line, but you're going to spend a lot of time adding a lot of extra levels. So like I say, Revit is a little bit clunky. And the final there, if we've merged them all back together, you're not really getting a great deal of control over what's happening with the merge tool. But it can be handy if you've split a bit off and decided that you didn't want to split a bit off and you want to bring them back together again. You can use that merge tool to bring them back together. So then the next one is the sub-region tool. Now this is probably the one that we're going to spend more time using. The sub-region tool just splits it off so you can have a different material on the topography. So you draw out your roads, planting beds, car parks, whatever it is that you're doing. But the new bit that you've split off still follows the underlying levels, so you don't get that step change. It does actually, yeah. So it does actually, so you can see we've put the road in the front there, it will go up and down with the levels. So just to demonstrate, if we decided we wanted to pick out, this was a mugger on this particular project, but so again we're using the select line tool with the tab just to quickly get that rectangular in. So we've got that set out that it's a different area. You can see that it's a different material. You can change the material independently. But just to demonstrate what happens when we bring the levels in, if we add a new level that brings that up, and it will bring all the ground up around it. So although the materials are different, it's brought the ground up. But you can see if you look back on the plan view, it doesn't actually change how it looks in 2D. You've still got your 2D square is still square. It's just brought the ground up around the edge of it. And again, you can add as many kind of split regions in different areas to suit. But if you've got a decent CAD file to start with, using the tab select line tool will make it a lot quicker rather than having to trace over all your CAD plans. So the next one now is the graded region. So you use the graded region to pick out the bit of site that you're actually changing the levels for. So you want to, when you're creating that, you get the option. You can either just leave the levels around the perimeter and have it completely with no levels at all in the centre, or you can keep it with all the internal points. It's entirely up to you. There's not a right or wrong answer. It's how much you change in the site and how you want to remodel it. If you want to use Revit to do cut and fill volumes, you have to use the graded region. It's a bit clunky, it's not always that accurate. You tend to get a few errors with the cut and fill, and you probably best leave it to civil engineers to work out. But if you did want to use it, you have to use the graded region. That's the only way to get Revit to automatically calculate your cut and fill levels. Again, as a key point here, think about where you want to go before you start cutting bits off. Generally, I would say if you know that most of the site you're not touching, just try and pick the smallest area possible to regrade, because then if you do want to make changes to your existing site, you can do it without having to do it on the existing and on then the proposed to pick up those changes. But you need to make sure that you're not just picking your site, because chances are you'll want to regrade adjacent footpaths and roads and bits like that. So do have a think about where you make that cut, so that you're not having to go back and redo a lot of level work on there. So just to demonstrate there, the graded region, we've got picked out, that's the bit of site that we're going to regrade. So I've already used the split tool to split that off. I've made sure that you're in the new construction now, because this is the proposed site. So you click on your graded region, and I'm going to keep the existing points. There's not that many anyway in this particular version, but again, that's your decision which one you want to use. So we've picked the point, we've now got the surface. So you can see that it's gone green because it's in the new phase. So we can change the levels within that, and then you can start to see the difference that bleeds through from the existing to the proposed. So it shows us red where you've cut the ground away, obviously where it's green, that's where your new ground is your existing. And then you get the dashed line which shows you that was your existing site, your solid line is your proposed site levels. So, obviously you use those principles to add as much information to your site as you like. The next item then is building pads. So this just creates a level surface for your building. It kind of drags the ground up or down to wherever you set your building pad. So again, there's no right or wrong answer. I tend to model it as a thin 3mm DPM, but you can model it to whatever you suit. I think I just use the thin line because again it kind of disappears and you don't really see it there. But you can put it where it makes sense to you. There's not a right or wrong answer, but just put it where it makes sense. You can have as many building pads as you like, but you can't overlap, but they can share edges. But you just have to be careful if you've got edges in the same plane, you can't overlap them. So if two lines out and you're wanting to move that one over to that one, you move this one first and then move that one. You always have to make sure you're moving them so they're not overlapping. And it can get a little bit tricky, and sometimes if you've locked it to things, you can end up with a lot of errors and having to redraw building pads. So I would say try and do it as simply as possible, because they can be a little bit quirky with the building pads. The other issue with building pads is that you can't phase them unless the dirt changes to 2020. I've not used 2020 yet, but I don't think we have. So if you've got a site where you're demolishing buildings and you're demolishing building pads, you're going to end up with a hole in your topography, which you don't want. So the workaround, and if you're not familiar with design options, you'll have to come to a different session for design options. But create a design option, one for your existing, one for your new, and park your existing one, and then work in your new design option to kind of work as you normally would and create your new construction within that. And that way then, if you're in your existing files, you select the existing design option, and any of the new drawings, you only see what you want to see. You can delete the old building pads and delete the old bits of the site that you don't actually need. So just a quick demonstration there then of drawing your building pad. Again, you can use your pick line tool, but you set your building level, and then either set as I say pick line tool, or you just draw around. And as I say, you can lock these lines to the building. But again, if you're changing your building a bit, you're likely to get a lot of errors, and it's often just as easy just to draw the lines on. So once you've got your building pad set up in there, it does need to be a closed loop. And then you can see it's brought the ground up around the building. So because the buildings, we've set the building a bit higher than the surrounding ground, you've got that vertical line of the ground just coming up underneath the building footprint, and the rest of the site's stayed as it is. So that's where then you'd regrade on your proposed site. You go into your Ready surface and just add your points to bring your building line up. So you just fill out the site levels that you want, and then just start adding points. You can be as accurate or as rough as you like to be. You can be very accurate, but you're not always getting great results from it anyway. You can get perhaps just as meaningful results just from putting in a few rough levels. As long as you remember that Revit works by using triangulation, so if you do have some rogue levels, even rogue levels underneath the building pad, that will still affect the levels outside, and you can often find that you're needing to add extra bits of levels just to kind of counteract the triangulation, which is where Revit really does get a little bit clunky for adding in site levels, that you'll find you're having to keep adding extra levels to just counteract the issues of the triangulation. But you can get, you can bring up your ground line, so on your elevations you've got a reasonable kind of accurate item to bring up the levels. So we've finished on that there, we've added our level landing. So you can see there that we've stopped some areas of red which is showing through as you cut and fill, but we've brought the levels up to the building. And again, because we're only working with that square of the site, the edge, the perimeter where it joins the existing, that's stayed in the same plane and it's still tied together at the edges. And you can see there where you've got your dash line for your existing site as opposed to your proposed site, and it'll work out your cut and fill tools to there. So I think that's probably about 45 minutes. And just to recap there on just a few topics that we've hit on, if anybody's got any quick questions.
Yeah, we're structural, so we get our surface from service boys.
Yeah.
But I think our biggest problem is when I think we've been approaching the way that we insert CAD drawings. We've been using our shared drawings, and we open it the second time it rotates and everything.
Yeah.
Which it's a right pain in the backside. So what you're saying is that our CAD drawing that we're bringing in as origin, the origin on the CAD drawing has got to match the project base point in the model.
No, not necessarily. For your site file, yes, but as a structural engineer, it depends, you might not be using as a site file. All you need is, if you've got your CAD file and it's drawn close to the origin and in positive space, and you've got known northings and eastings drawn in, that's all Revit needs to set it up. And this is where if you bring the CAD file in and then you say, I want to bring the coordinates in, use the shared coordinates from the CAD file, it works. But if someone does move your CAD file, or there's a bit that's changed in your CAD file, or even that someone has saved it as a UCS rather than the WCS, you start getting things just jumping around, and it seems great that it's doing it all automatically and it's saving you a job, but a little bit of knowledge or lack of knowledge and someone just tweaking, dragging, accidentally moving, and suddenly all your coordinates are...
See, generally, we will get the architect's model, because in the BEP it will have the project base point will be on grid A1 or... Yeah, or
wherever is sensible.
So what do we do then when we want to import, origin we call a CAD drawing so it gets in the right place. Say I've got to bring a CAD drawing into the main model, which is quite common.
Yeah.
Does the origin in the CAD drawing have to match the project base point or the survey point?
It depends whether it's a site drawing or whether it's a building drawing. To me,
Oh right, well it's usually building for all.
if it's a building,
Yeah.
then the CAD file of the building ought to match the project base point of the file. So if I'd exported a CAD file from my Revit model,
Yeah.
I'd export it so that the project base point is my 0, 0. And generally, in my drawings, that's slightly off. You know, my building will be up here and my project base point will be off down here somewhere, so that I know that all my building's going to be in positive space.
Right, so if I do a block out the drawing and the origin is the same as the project base point, it
Yeah.
will go in the same place and all
Yeah.
remain there. By doing it by origin to origin.
Yeah, if you've got a CAD file that someone has taken from the Revit, an export from the Revit file, and that's just been exported from the standard view as a project base point and project north. If you bring that in origin to origin, that should match up with where the Revit file is, and it should match up, you know, from. Yeah, I mean, this is where it needs setting up at the start so that everybody is using the same. If someone has just brought in, you know, someone's in the CAD file just expressed something in and brought it in wherever, and then they've drawn wherever, then it's not gonna line through. You know, people need to think about where they've drawn it and where they've linked things in. But I've found by leaving the project base point where it is, drawing in positive space, exporting CAD files so that that's the origin. You bring the CAD, you know, building CAD files, bring them back in, origin to origin, and I've never had any.
I would agree. I mean, the way we set our stuff up, the building models, is trying to get everybody to link their files origin to origin,
Yeah.
and forget about shared coordinates,
Yeah.
forget about site coordinates, because you only need that when you come to give your site coordinates.
Yeah.
And if you start mixing shared coordinates in with other disciplines, and they get so confused as to what they're
Yeah.
supposed to be linking to, just get everybody working origin to origin, whether it's CAD files, Revit files, whatever, and you're fine.
But that is where, coming back to my earlier points about making sure that your project base point is in the same place as your Revit origin point. Because I did once have an issue where the file was just coming in at a weird angle and not where it was expected, and we discovered after a bit of turning and throwing that the project base point had been moved off the origin point and rotated. So every time you brought that file in, it was going off the Revit origin, which again you can't see, it is invisible, and it was always in the wrong place. So it's worth just checking that you've got that, the project base point is at the Revit origin.
There is I think if you right-click the project base point, there is an option to send it back to the, the origin point, so that's a good way to check.
Yeah, if you've not.
There's also in Revit 2020 now, I think it's
I'm not really
2022.
interested, yeah.
You've got the origins now exposed, so there's actually
Oh, so you
an
can see
icon
that,
there
but I don't have it more. That's it, I can
Which
take
again,
out my
we
little
like
CAD
already.
crosshairs then. It's about time they did fix that, really.
There's no paper clip, are there?
No, there's not.
There's no paper clip, so you have to use a pin.
Okay, well, yeah, they fix one thing and something else. So,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you very much.